Hey growers, what's up? It's Lucas, and staking and pruning are the most common topics when it comes to growing tomatoes. So today I'm going to show you how you can stake and prune your tomato plants so you get some really nice healthy plants that produce lots of delicious tomatoes. Before we get started, I just want to say that pruning tomatoes is not completely necessary for getting amazing harvests. However, it does have some serious benefits, such as increasing the airflow in your garden, which will hopefully reduce the chance of disease. And also it just looks really neat and tidy, and it's a great way to manage your plants and mitigate risks associated with growing tomatoes. It also allows you to grow more varieties of tomatoes in a small area because you don't have to plant the plants as far apart. So you can see that these tomato plants here are looking really nice and healthy, but they need to get pruned, neatened up, and staked. So come on, I'll show you exactly how I'm gonna do that. So the first thing I'm gonna do is drive some 6-foot tall stakes into the ground. These are oak stakes that I picked up off of Kijiji, and they look like really good quality, and I think they're going to be amazing for growing my tomatoes this year. So you might be wondering, Lucas, why didn't you just put in the stakes when you first planted these tomato plants? I have a very strategic reason for doing this, and that is, see these flowers here? Well, I want the stake to be on the other side of the stem, because you see, with tomato plants, pretty much all the flower clusters are going to grow up on the same side of the stem. So say I had the stake on the same side as the flower cluster. What could happen is that it could press against the stem of this cluster and potentially break it off or damage it. So by waiting until the flowers come out to stake your plants, you can ensure that the stake is not going to damage the flower cluster. You might be wondering, is this going to damage the tomatoes' roots? Well, in my case, I planted the tomatoes in a trench, which means that this stake is not anywhere near the root ball. However, you do need to be conscientious of where the root ball of your plant is so that you don't hit it with a stake. Okay, so now the stake's in the ground and it's time to prune the tomato plant. So the method I'm going to be showing you guys today is the single stem method. And this is the most common, most popular way of pruning tomatoes. And it's the one that I recommend doing if you're starting out or if you're growing in a very small space. So this is a Super Sweet 100 cherry tomato plant. It's doing really well, and we're going to be training it single stem like I mentioned. So single stemming is exactly what it sounds like. I'm going to be pruning this tomato plant to a single stem or a single leader that grows all the way up the stake, and then once it reaches the top, I'm probably going to let it grow about a foot taller. So this stake is about probably 5 feet above the ground now since I pounded it in about a foot. The tomato is going to get about a foot taller, it's going to be 6 feet, and then I'm going to cut it off at the top, and that's going to focus the plant's energy on ripening that final fruit. So pruning is actually super easy and quite fun. What you got to do is look for these little things called suckers, and these are these little green shoots that will just jut out from between the main stem and a leaf branch. So you can see here, this is a sucker. This is actually a sucker as well, this one on the bottom, because there was a branch there and I cut it off. This one's a sucker, and as you go up you can see there's just more and more suckers. So to get rid of it, all you got to do is grab it between your thumb and index finger, twist, and it'll just pop right off. And you just do this all the way up the plant until you've got a nice single stem. Every now and then you're going to find a rather large sucker on your tomato plant, and I definitely wouldn't recommend trying to snap it off with your fingers because it's probably not going to snap off very cleanly. So what I would recommend doing is getting yourself some pruning shears. Whenever you're using pruning shears on plants, it's very important to make sure to sterilize them first. So what I'm going to do is just pour some isopropyl alcohol on a piece of paper towel, and then I'm just going to take my pruning shears and wipe them down. This is going to ensure that they're really nice and clean and that they won't cause any transfer of diseases to your tomato plants. In a perfect world, you'd sterilize the shears between each tomato plant you prune to prevent transfer of diseases from one to another. This might seem a bit ridiculous, but it's a great way to prevent the transfer of disease throughout your garden. So just take your pruning shears and snip it off cleanly. And now you have a nice clean cut that's not going to get infected with disease. Some people will say to take the bottom leaves off the tomato plant because those are going to be the ones that are the oldest and in contact with the soil, so they're the most likely to get disease first. But at this point, I'm just going to leave them on because the plant's pretty small still, and it needs those leaves to generate photosynthesis so that it really grows nice and quick. A strong word of caution is once you get to the top couple inches of the tomato plant, don't prune. Just leave it, because if the tomato plant just decides to terminate for some reason, meaning the top stops growing, or if some sort of insect or critter bites it off, then you're not going to have any more suckers to grow and replace it. So by not touching the suckers on this top part of the plant, it's just kind of an insurance policy against termination for whatever reason. Okay, so once you finish pruning your tomato, now it's time to tie it up. So this is actually a grocery store bag that I just cut into a strip. You can get this special plant tie tape at the dollar store. So what you do is you just take your plant, and it's really simple. Just tie it up like this. I just do a double square knot, and simple as that. Nothing too fancy. And there you have it. That is a very nicely staked and pruned single stem tomato plant so far. Obviously you're going to have to go back throughout the season and keep pruning it as it grows up the stake and tying it on as it grows. But this is a very good method of staking your tomato plants. It's simple. It does take a bit of time over the season, but in the end it's going to give you some really nice, tall, healthy plants that will produce lots of tomatoes. It's one of the things that's so great about staking your tomatoes is that you're taking advantage of the vertical space in your garden. So if you do live in the city like me and you're growing in your front or backyard, you'll have a decent amount of production in a fairly small garden. So again, very simple. Just pluck the suckers off from top to bottom, and this will be a nice, healthy plant that's ready to grow and ready to produce lots of delicious tomatoes. So on this tomato plant right here, we have a situation that I see fairly often with tomato plants, and that is where the sucker grows out kind of like another stem. It's not perfectly in between the main stem and the leaf branch, and in that case you can't really snap it out. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to go in with our pruning shears and just snip it off. And again, just tying it up. I would say probably about 6 to 8 inches up the plant is good. Some people suggest doing a kind of a figure 8 before tying it. I don't recommend that. I've done it before and it tends to slip down the plant and the stake, so this way is just fine, just a regular loop. One thing I recommend not doing is using twine. Some people do use twine, and really you can use it, it's fine, but sometimes what will happen is when the tomato plant starts getting larger and the stem starts thickening up, the stem can get kind of girdled by the twine because the twine is not stretchy. The best case scenario is to use some sort of stretchy material like this. I feel like I'm going to fall and break my neck, or get impaled by these stakes. That would not be good either. But it's a very distinct possibility at this point. This is actually super dangerous. I should really have a stepladder right here. Just saying. One of the interesting things about suckers, and a lot of people know this, but what you can do is you can put them in the soil, and provided that they have decent conditions like water and nutrients, they will actually grow, and you can actually get another tomato plant out of this. It'll be a clone of the original plant, so that means it's genetically the same, so it should produce the same tomatoes exactly, which, you know, at this point in the season, you know, for me it'd be too late, but if you have a long growing season, maybe you could get another plant, and that would just be a great way to get cheap tomato plants and also get successive harvests. So in this raised bed right here, I'm growing cherry tomatoes and sauce tomatoes, and these are all indeterminate varieties. So I've got all of them growing single stem up these stakes. They're going to be really awesome. And then at the back here, I have 2 sun gold tomato plants. These are both cherry tomatoes. And this plant right here is doing really good, and this one right here is really not. I actually planted this one first, but you can see that one just looks a whole lot better. This one, for some reason, like, the leaves are just kind of bigger than they should. It's kind of hard to tell on camera, but I can tell this plant is just not up to snuff. This raised bed is full of beefsteak tomatoes. So I've got 8 beefsteaks in cages, and for these ones, I'm actually pruning them a different method. And I thought real quick I'd show you guys what I'm going to be doing to prune these tomatoes. It's a bit different than the single stem method over there, but it's the same kind of principle. So this plant right here is a big beef. It's an indeterminate vining type tomato, and I've got it growing in this cage. So you can see the beefsteaks also get lots of suckers growing on the stem. I'm going to be keeping the sucker right under the first flower cluster, so that's this one right here, and I'm going to be pruning off all the rest. Okay, so now I've got all the suckers under it pruned, and throughout the season what I'm going to be doing is having these 2 stems, so it's going to kind of fork off like that, and I'm going to have 2 strings hanging down from the top of the cage like this in kind of a V shape. They're going to be hanging down, and I'm going to tie them around this tomato plant stem, and then I'm going to be kind of spiraling each of these 2 stems up its own piece of twine. So I'm going to have like a double tomato plant basically, and it's going to be really cool. I've never done it this way with the string trellis method, so it's kind of a unique way using a cage and strings combined, but I'm really interested to see how it's going to work out. And with this plant right here, this is a Pruden's purple tomato plant. I think I'm just going to let it go wild. I'm not going to prune it at all because I found that the potato leaf varieties, for some reason, I just get the feeling they're best left untouched. And then I also have 3 bush type tomatoes right here at the front, and I'm not going to be pruning those ones at all because they're determinate, so they're going to produce a set amount of fruit. Pruning off any of those suckers is just getting rid of potential fruit. All right, so that's it for this video. How to single stem your tomato plants and some alternative methods of pruning I'm going to be using this year. Hope you enjoyed this video, hope you found it valuable, and if you did, smash that like button because it helps me get my videos out there for the YouTube algorithm and for other gardeners to see and learn from. So thanks for watching. I really appreciate your time, and I'll see you next time.